together so quickly. Because mainly, so what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk a little bit about the Investing in Communities Fund. We do also have Jill on the call today, who is from the Investing in Communities Fund. So if you do have specific questions about it, once we get to the end of what I'm going to say, then Jill will be able to answer that. But what I'm going to talk about is probably more general, because it might be that you're going for investing communities. It might be you've already submitted your application and you were quick off the mark last Tuesday when it opened. Or it might be that you're just generally looking to embed a little bit more climate action in funding. So I'm going to go through a little bit as to what the hub is, what it is that we do, and then talk a little bit about community needs and climate action, and how maybe I think maybe to some groups, and certainly to some groups that we've been speaking to recently, is that climate action feels like it's something that's maybe separate, and it actually doesn't need to be separate to what you're doing. You'll actually find that when you look at simple practical measures, for us as third sector organisations and community organisations, there's probably quite a lot that we're doing already. We just don't necessarily think of it as being climate action. So it's maybe just thinking about ways that you can reframe around your projects for going for certain funding. And certainly, Investing in Communities is one of the first larger funds that has opened, where we're really being asked to look at that, at the climate aspect of it. But there has been other funds, particularly recently in Highlands, the SSE Sustainable Development Fund, which was open last year and closed, I think, at the end of January. They were looking for net zero within it. We're going to find more and more that funders are really looking for some form of sustainability, some form of climate action to be embedded within the projects that we're doing. And so, yeah, it's to start thinking about how you can start doing some climate action in your communities, how you can start talking about climate within your communities, and how you can engage with them through projects. And I've got an ideal example of it there on this first slide, which is the Crown Connects community larder. I think that Crown Connects were a group in Inverness who formed as a COVID-19 support group. I don't think that they necessarily thought of themselves as doing climate action when they decided that they were having a community larder, but they started a community larder during COVID. And it is climate action because they're repurposing surplus food. So, and we've got quite a lot of these, particularly in Highlands, we've got a lot of these food tables, community larders, things like that have sprung up, and a lot of work that a lot of us are doing around food. And, repurposing surplus food, which can be done in lots of different ways through projects. It doesn't need to necessarily be a community larder, but that's just one example of how you can look at it within your community and how you're also solving community needs. So I'll introduce a little bit about the hub, first of all, to anybody who's not aware. So we are the North Highlands and Islands Climate Hub. I'm the project manager, and I'm joined also by Stephanie Ramers, who's our senior development officer. You have to be kind to Steph because she only started on Monday, so this is only her second day, but she might be familiar to some of you because she worked for Caithness Voluntary Group before. And then I've got Bethany, who's one of our Highlands development officers, and Johnny, who's our Islands development officer. So we're funded by the Scottish Government for 3 years. We are one of the first in a network of regional climate action hubs, which will be coming online. We're supporting communities across Highlands and the Northern Isles of Orkney and Shetland. When we say Highland, and we are North Highland officially, but as there are no other hubs online yet for Highland, we will support anybody within Highland that's coming to us. We're not going to distinguish too heavily or say, well, no, you're in near and we're not going to help you. We're not going to do that. We will support any communities within Highland that are looking for support. The aim of the hub is that we support through anything that a group might be looking for in terms of a climate action project. So that might be engaging with your community about climate change. It might be simply hosting a climate conversation and we can lend support via our development officers. Or it might be that you're considering a more adventurous type of project to combat climate change. And so we're here to support with the design, development and delivery of projects. That might be being a critical friend, looking at a funding application for you, or it might be coming along to a training in carbon literacy or looking at net zero policies, or learning from other groups and us connecting you with other groups. We're very, very keen that we can connect groups together who are maybe doing similar work, and so that they can learn from each other. Just as I said, with carbon literacy training, we're working on that at the moment, and also how to do your net zero policies and your environmental policies. So again, we're there to help with any mentoring, training, mentoring, support, events. We did a survey just towards the end of our first 6 months in March, and certainly funding was very, very high up on the list of types of training and support and workshops that people are looking to see. We're here to also support community groups to be climate ready. So it might be that you maybe already are doing climate action, or it might be that you're just starting on this journey of considering climate within what you're doing. It might be that you're a community anchor organisation and you know of other groups that exist within your community that could maybe benefit from being a little bit more climate ready and being more climate conscious. So we're here to support any groups along that kind of journey. So for example, we've been working quite a lot with community councils across Highlands. I'm speaking to village halls groups, things like that. So it doesn't need to be necessarily a big group who are doing climate action and very obvious climate action work. It can just be looking at how you can become a little bit more climate conscious within your organisation. We also have funding available. It's just seed funding. It's currently closed because we have just finished doing a funding round for the Highland Climate Festival, which takes place between 25th of June to the 3rd of July. So we were dealing with the funding for there, but we will shortly be opening our seed funding pot again, which is where you can apply for up to £500 to do some form of community engagement around climate, or that's something that might help to kickstart a project, or be used as if you're missing a little bit of match funding and there's climate within the project, then we can help with that as well. What we can also do, we did a little bit before the end of March, is that not just help with funding, we've also lent development officer time to community engagement events. So for example, Bethany did quite a lot of work with Crown Connects in Inverness, where we funded them for quite a large community engagement event they did, but also we lent Bethany's time to assist with that community engagement event. And that's something that we're very happy to do, and go along and talk climate within your community. So that's about the hub. So funding and climate action. So particularly, there's lots of terms around funding, and probably more so within, you know, if you are looking at investing in communities, there are some terms that maybe people have not thought about before. So just to talk a little bit about some of those terms. So when we're talking about net zero, we're talking about where the greenhouse gas emissions going into the atmosphere are balanced by the removal from the atmosphere. So reducing greenhouse gas emissions, reducing carbon, and then it can also be looking at carbon offsetting. I'm not a big fan of the carbon offsetting, but we can look at, so sometimes when we hear about carbon offsetting, we're hearing about large companies but buying large tracts of land. That's maybe not what we're looking at, but peatland restoration, nature restoration, planting trees, all of that is things that will help the transition to net zero. We also talk about a just transition, so that's ensuring that nobody's left behind. So ensure that the most vulnerable are supported in any form of transition. Society is going to have to change quite significantly in order to reach net zero. And just transition can be spoken about in various different ways. So where we have poverty and inequality in our communities, and also where there is just transition is also spoken about in terms of where we have industries that might not exist any longer, and ensuring that those people are also not left behind. Place-based, we also talk quite a lot in funding now about place-based funding. This is an example actually of that work that Bethany did in Crown Connects. I actually didn't plan that at all, but that was using the place standard. So what is it that your community needs? What's your community telling you that it needs? So when you're going for funding now, generally looking at being place-based, having that kind of evidence from your place, looking at how you're improving your place, you know, that it's not something that somebody else has decided that should be happening with your place. It's very much taking that holistic viewpoint of of where it is that you live. And I think that that also then leads into where communities can be looking to use climate action within the projects that they're doing to solve community needs as well, which I'll come on to in the next slide. So in particular for investing in communities, that they are looking for, so there's two different elements that's been sought for. So how will you engage your community and how they can take action on climate change as part of a just transition? And how will you deliver your project in an environmentally friendly way? So there's two different elements that you should be thinking about. So how are you going to, through that project for the Investing in Communities Fund, if that's the application that you're making, how are you going to engage your community and how they can take action on climate change? And then how can you deliver your project in an environmentally friendly way? For quite a lot of groups, I think quite a lot of you who are here today because you've heard about it through our newsletter, you probably are considering taking some form of climate action. But for some groups, it's going to be really, really new for them to be thinking about what it is that they're doing as in terms of climate change, because they've maybe been a health and social welfare type organisation. It's maybe not been thinking about how they do things in an environmentally friendly way. So it is a little bit of a switch away from it. So climate action and community needs, type of projects that you could be considering. So I'm going to give some examples of some projects in a little bit. I should also make clear that I sit with a dual hat on of being both the project manager for the hub and also the development manager for Thurso Community Development Trust, because I can talk a little bit about some of our projects and some of the other benefits that there's been. But generally, in terms of, it goes back to this, that climate action doesn't need to be something that's separate from what you're doing. Climate action and solving other needs within your community can fit together. So we've got here togetherness and mental well-being, looking at community growing, active travel, improved green spaces. All of those are climate action projects, but they also have huge benefits in how people feel, their mental health. We've run a community growing project in Thurso for nearly 4 years now. And yes, we talk climate with the people who attend that sessions. We encourage them to grow their own, as well as at the community garden. We've got people who have invested in polytunnels. There's surplus veg all over Thurso. But actually the greatest benefit that there is to their health and to their mental well-being and to being connected and reducing social isolation. Similarly with active travel. With active travel, we can see it with initiatives such as Critical Mass in Inverness that encourage people to get on their bikes together and to cycle. We're reducing social isolation. People get to meet each other. They get to join in an activity together. Obviously, active travel, walking and cycling is going to have huge benefits for your health as well, because you will be more active. Improved green spaces very obviously have benefits for mental health and well-being, and then go back to that place-based approach of making your place feel nicer. If somewhere feels nicer, particularly in these northern climes that we have, where we can be under darkness for quite a long time during the winter time, improving our green spaces so that they perk us up during the summer is both climate action and improving mental well-being and health. Food security, so community larders, community growing, encouraging local food. All of those things are climate action, but they also solve needs within our communities. So community larders generally redistribute surplus food. Community growing, as we've just said, also has benefits for togetherness and mental well-being. It creates greater resilience within the local food system, for people to learn how to grow their own and to have facilities to be able to grow their own. And then local food, again, we have resilience in the food system, and local food benefits our local economies, all of those great things that go along with local food. Fuel security. So really big topic at the moment, given the energy crisis that we're facing. There's a lot of work that's going on in communities at the moment as to where we go to in October when the energy price rises again. So those kind of projects, so looking at energy efficiency advice, possibly a renewable energy project, renewable heating. I happen to know that from some of the conversations that I've had with some funders of late, not investing in communities, but there are some funders who are beginning to look at, could communities actually take the lead in retrofitting homes and providing training and skills development? So that is the type of thing that funders may be looking for, if that's the type of project that you might be thinking about for your community as well. Certainly, we know that Caithness and Sutherland and Orkney and Shetland suffer hugely from fuel insecurity. And again, it's those projects that help us to connect to other people and we solve inequalities within our communities, but they're also climate action projects. Keeping things connected and equitable. I'm a big fan of being equitable rather than equality, that we create an even playing field for everybody. And things like repair cafes, bike sheds, tool libraries, again, we're looking at creating a more circular economy. They are climate action projects, but they also connect people and they keep things equitable. You know, it's we've worked quite a lot in Caithness with the Caithness Poverty Action Group, which Steph is very familiar with. And one of the things that's been looked at there is particularly when we come to possibly October time and with the rising energy costs, the rising cost of living, that we're going to see people who have never struggled before in our communities who are now starting to struggle. And actually, one of the ways that we can get through to those people and engage with those people who may not want to admit that they're struggling is through encouraging them to get involved in climate action projects, things like repair cafes, bike sheds, tools, libraries, where they're not having to buy new, where we're creating a more circular economy, where we're creating small initiatives that help people within communities to save money and to connect with each other. All of them are climate action, but they again solve issues within our communities. So I've got some project examples here. Just of things that you can, and I'm going to apologize now because I've got two examples, I've got two pictures that are projects from Thurso, but that's what I had the photos for. So, so the first one is Socially Growing. So that is our zero waste refill shop in Thurso. It's not just a shop, we've also taken over greenhouses, which are currently being refurbished. Now it looks like well, from peeking in the window just prior to where we opened, it looks like a lovely shop. We're going to have lovely greenhouses and we're going to grow lots and lots of food, and it is a social enterprise. But that's not actually the reason why we have Socially Growing. It's taking climate action, it's reducing plastic waste by encouraging people to shop plastic free and encouraging people to be able to buy food that's been grown locally. But again, that's not the reason why we have Socially Growing. The reason that we have Socially Growing is that in Thurso, there are significant issues with young people, young men in particular, suffering from addiction and mental health issues, who have become completely disengaged from the mainstream, so much so they won't claim benefits. They won't go to college, but they're very enterprising young men. So actually the point of Socially Growing is for us to be able to provide through that shop and through our greenhouses training opportunities for young people in the Thurso area, the young people who everybody else has given up on. So for example, we are just going to be beginning a process in July where we're taking people to do community payback orders through criminal justice and offering training facilities for young people as we build up to the point of offering foundation apprenticeships. And that's in climate, land-based, horticultural, and enterprise skills that we'll be offering that through Socially Growing. So that's the need that we're solving within our community, and we're doing it through taking climate action. And what happens with that is we will have, you know, abundant local food and be able to have that on our local menus, and that people can shop plastic free, and we're encouraging things to be waste free. But actually at the very, very root of the whole reason for it is providing something for young people in the area. Next example, as I spoke about, is Crown Connects. So one of the many community larders that have sprung up across Highlands, and I know that we've got one in Orkney, which are solving a need within a community of providing food for people who need it, but providing sharing and reducing waste. by taking surplus food from supermarkets. I think, forgive me if I'm wrong, Bethany, but Crown Connects take pretty much everything from supermarkets.
Yeah, it's the Co-op and Tesco that they mainly take from. I would say it's probably mainly the Co-op is it's closest to them, but they're also working on a community orchard right now where residents of the Crown area and Inverness where they're based, they purchased fruit trees and they distributed those to the community, and residents have them in their back garden. So I think they are awaiting some fresh fruit to go in their community fridge and larder too.
Good stuff. And then we've got Incredible Edible just down below them. So Incredible Edible are again in Inverness, and they have, very similar to Moofid and Muir of Ord, we also have in Thurso as well. So encouraging growing through spaces that you might not think that you're going to grow some fruit and veg. So through city centre gardens, they've got down at Nest Bank Church, they've got, yeah. And then they have some other spots throughout Inverness city centre as well. Moofid very, very successfully have had both a community larder, a community orchard, and also grow boxes throughout the village, and much of that fruit and veg then goes into their community larder. So it improves the green spaces and also provides food and locally grown food. And sometimes it can be quite amazing what can grow in a Highland climate. Not what you would always expect to grow in a Highland climate, but it will grow. Then we've got cycling. So I think this is an image from Critical Mass in Inverness. But again, cycling, encouraging active travel. So whether it's paths, whether it's cycling, I'll come on to a little bit more about that and how you might be able to think about cycling in your operations. All of those benefits for health and well-being, connecting people. A few projects that I've heard of lately have been focusing on maybe where young people, where they need to be able to travel to go to work, and actually it's in rural areas, and being provided with a bike may be able to help them to be able to travel to that workplace and to actually gain employment by having a bike. So that's something that could be considered. And then I've got community growing. So this is actually our community garden in Thurso, looking very abundant and amazing. It's a shame it's not got a blue sky in behind it. But that entire space engages people with climate action. We do composting workshops, we do growing workshops. We have a polycrub in there, which came from Shetland, so that we can grow much better. It's not an easy thing growing things in Thurso. But they were also a climate action project that then grew into using recycled materials, that grew into a social enterprise. We also use that garden space for, it's available for other groups to have meetings. We've got an outdoor kitchen in it, which is maybe the photo that I should have used. But again, it's improving people. We've got craft groups that meet up there. We do various different food workshops. So they just had a kind of pizza day on Saturday using the pizza oven. We work quite a lot with Ormley Community Association. They have a young mums group. So we get them down and into the garden and helping kids to understand where food is coming from as well. So moving on then is to how you can within, so if it's not an overt climate action project, so I hope that you are all considering doing some form of an overt climate action project, but looking also at how you operate as an organization. So various different things that you can look at. Some are simple things. I think I kind of generally explain this as being maybe just being a little bit more mindful in your operations. I think when it comes to climate action, it's something that we all need to embed into our daily lives, that we're being that little bit more mindful about what we buy as an individual, about what we do with our waste as an individual, how we reduce our waste. And I don't think that it's any different for how our organizations operate. It's just being that little bit more mindful about what you're doing. I will say that on occasion it can cause battles, particularly in an office space. About 2 weeks ago, came in to find one of our desks completely covered and items from the bin with post-it notes on it from one of our development officers, but we learned some things, so that was very good about exactly which bin we should be putting things in. So thinking about when you're purchasing, when you're procuring things, first of all, do you really need to buy it? Is it really, really needed for that project? Could you repurpose something else that you've had for another project? Could you get it from somewhere that's been pre-loved? Can you buy something that's refurbished? Maybe particularly when you're looking at electrical equipment, could you think about within your community, is like, do you have a larger community? Do you have an area around about you? Could you think about maybe something like an asset bank for your community? Like who has something that you might be able to borrow? So do you really need to go and buy that new projector? Could you borrow it from the community group that's in the next village? In Caithness, we've actually formed a Caithness asset bank with things like projectors, PA systems, gazebos, chairs, and are doing a kind of general audit of what's available within the county, because it costs a lot of money. I mean, one of the main reasons is it costs a lot of money to get things up the A9 if we have to go and hire things. And delivery charges can also be really expensive if we need to go and buy things. So actually we've formed an asset bank where people can borrow things. Are you purchasing from sustainable sources? That might be that you're buying from somewhere that's got eco credentials. Could you purchase it locally? And if you can't purchase it locally, what's the credentials of the company that you're buying it from? Could you purchase it from a social enterprise, which would be, again, you know, if you can buy eco in from a social enterprise, then that's an amazing thing to do because you're supporting another community as well. One of the other things that I haven't listed there, but definitely within our rural areas, there are places that we do have to go and order things from that's unavoidable, where we don't want to have to go and order it from. But when it comes to something as simple as your stationery, sometimes you don't have any other choice but to go to that big A that send things in lots of cardboard boxes. But can you actually, you know, keep it? Do you have to buy things individually? Can you go and buy things in one order, once a quarter, once a month, so that at least you're attempting to get things in one delivery rather than in sporadic, broken apart deliveries? Energy. So if you're operating a community building, if you're using a community space, are you using those spaces efficiently in terms of their energy usage? So do you really need to have the lights on during the day? Could you cut that off? If it's your own building or your own facility, are you using renewable energy suppliers? If it is something like, say, for example, public toilets, which a lot of us through Highland operate public toilets, very low cost option that you could consider is having, you know, sensors on your lights. Doesn't cost terribly much money, and it means that your lights are not on all the time in those public toilets. Could you do the same within your community buildings as well? Food. When you do an event, are you using local food suppliers? Are you supporting local food suppliers? For example, in my organisation, what we have is we have a spreadsheet that's, we're very fortunate in Thurso, there's actually lots of bakeries, so we're very good with local, but we have a spreadsheet to make sure that every time that we have an event, we use a different bakery, so we were taking one in turn. Because if you're using local food suppliers, you're not just reducing the carbon miles of the food, you're also supporting a local business, so you're helping your local economy. Are you using seasonal produce? So are you planning a dessert evening in December where you're having strawberries? Maybe reconsider that. It's just being that little bit more mindful about what it is that you're doing. And then what are you doing with your food waste from events? So you've had an event, you've had a workshop, you've supplied soup and sandwiches. Where is that? And it's not all been eaten. Where's that soup and sandwiches going? Is there another community group that's meeting that evening that you could pass that on to? Is there a community larder where you are that you could pass that on to? Can you consider composting facilities? Composting facilities, and I'll show you on my next slide, don't need to be horrifically complicated, as I have discovered. Also, are you asking people to pre-book? That's another really important one. Ask people to pre-book, and then you're not taking too much, you know, you're not having too much food then. Travel. So for your organization, for your service users, do you encourage walking or cycling? So when you signpost people to your project or to your organization, which are the first set of directions that you give to people? Is it for them to be driving? And I know rural communities, that would be a difficult one. But is there a way that people can take public transport? Should that be where on your website you have directions to where you are, that you're actually giving that through walking, cycling, and public transport before you're given the option of driving? Do you make use of lift shares? Do you have community transport where you are? Some of the community transport services now have electric minibuses. So could it be, instead of trying to encourage everybody to make their way individually by car to where you might be operating a project or operating an event or an activity, could you actually work with your local community transport provider and they have an electric bus, and that's how you get people to it? So again, it's just being that little bit more mindful and just thinking around things. And then how are you dealing with your waste? So do you recycle? Do you come into your office to post-it notes all over the rubbish that's been pulled out of the bin? But are there options for recycling? We know that in Highlands, there's not brilliant waste collections in Highland Regional Council area, but there are other options. So for example, your soft plastic, if you've got a co-op that's near you, the co-op is taking soft plastic. So can you rethink how you might be dealing with your waste in terms of recycling, that it's not just putting things into either the landfill bin or the recycling bin? Are there actually some other options that you can use for recycling? Are you composting? And then a big one, which could be quite an easy change for a community organisation to make, is can you use reusables rather than disposables? So we've all done it. We've all had an event that we've had a polystyrene cup at or a paper cup at, but actually in the long run, would you be better going and buying a pile of mugs from a charity shop, or asking for an amnesty within your community for mugs that you can then go and take to different events? Can you even go and ask for an amnesty of reusable cups that you can then go and take to events? And actually, it's one of those almost like a spend to save option as well, because we can, and we've certainly within COVID, there have been a lot of us that have spent a huge amount of money on disposable items. But actually, if we spend that little bit more, could we then use reusables? And actually, we're then taking down our overheads overall, because we're not keeping on going and buying these different things. So, I knew that there would still be an animation here. So this morning, I rushed around our office and just took some very quick photos. So that's one of our bins. We take our soft plastics, we count them up. We've got our instructions on the bin. We have instructions on every single bin in the office, and there are quite a few bins for the different things that we have. We collect up all of our soft plastics and we take them to the co-op. They have a collection point for soft plastics. This lovely pile of tires is not actually a pile of tires. It's actually our worm composting bin. This actually sits in the garden area at the back of our office. We have a small composting caddy that collects our canteen waste. We make sure that we have tea bags which can be composted, that don't have any plastic in them. It is quite a lot of tea bags that go in there, and some salad, some veg that doesn't quite get sold in the shop. We've also got, you can just see the scaffolding boards peeking in at the side there, because we're in the process of building a garden space at the back of that garden area. Those scaffold boards, and actually much of what came from the community garden and the community garden within Thurso, have been recycled and upcycled. That we have gone and got scaffold boards, Belfast sinks out of fields. The tires obviously have come from, you know, they're being repurposed, but that's our worm composting bin that we have at the back of our office. And then we've got an electric cargo bike, which is not ours, but it's currently on loan from Cycling UK, because we're doing deliveries from our shop using that electric cargo bike. We've also done our meals delivery using that electric cargo bike, which was very easy in the town, might be a little bit more difficult if you're in a rural area to be able to go 20 miles for some of these mints and tatties in the back of it. But it certainly has worked within the town for us to be able to do those kind of deliveries. So next, what I have is not specific to investing in communities, because it's more, you know, I think I'm always keen to say that if it's an investing in communities bid that you're planning, then that's great. But if it's a project that you're really, really looking to do, have a plan B as well, have a plan C, have a plan D. So some just general information about funding and where to find funding. I had a look last night through one of the spreadsheets that we have, and from the funding awards that we've done as Thursday Community Development Trust, we've got a 95% success rate at our funding bids. What I will say is the one that we didn't get was investing in communities 3 years ago. So hence why I'm not going to tell you how to write an investing in communities bid, but I am going to tell you where you can find other funding as well. So this is where I go to look for different funding sources. Some people will say that funding is an art, and I would absolutely agree with that. It is being very, very aware of what's coming up, what's already there, and all of the different organisations. Yeah, there's a lot to fund. I mean, one of the main things is just finding it in the first place. So these are some of the really good funding founders that I've found in the past and that I use. So Funding Scotland, which is a database, and you can search through Funding Scotland either thematically or you can search through it on a regional basis. One of the things that I find Funding Scotland very good for is actually finding closed funds, ironically. But it's when you're looking for something that's maybe thematic, then you can get a general awareness of what funding might be out there and when it might be reopening, because it's sometimes not always the best to be caught on the hop with a funding opportunity, to just suddenly see it on Twitter or Facebook and think, oh no, can I prepare something for that? Well, it closes in 2 weeks, so do I have something that's ready for it? In terms of looking at kind of a funding strategy, that's what I find Funding Scotland really, really good for, is because it lists even closed funds. So it might be a project that you have in mind and you can start to identify various different funders, and you know where, you know then that that's a funder that I'm going to keep an eye on for when that's going to reopen. The Argyll and Bute Funding Finder, I never know in workshops how much I should sell this to people before somebody finds out about it, but I certainly think it's one of the best kept secrets in community development. We can share a link to it, but the Argyll and Bute Funding Finder is amazing, comes out once a month, it's colour coded into different sections. It's a brilliant funding finder to receive in your email box, and one of the ones that I always use. Signing up to various newsletters. So there's the Hub newsletter. We produce a newsletter and we will have various different funding opportunities listed in it. Scottish Communities Climate Action Network as well, especially if you're specifically looking for climate action funding. Third sector interfaces always produce really, really good newsletters that always have funding opportunities listed in them. Scotland's Towns Partnership. Again, it's a really good funding finder that's sent out once a month. You do have to be a member of Scotland's Towns Partnership, but there are organisations who possibly are members and who get it and who comb through it and find out about it and then put it out in their newsletters, like what the Hub does. Foundation Scotland, particularly if you're looking at local community benefit funds, then Foundation Scotland are one of the main, you know, a lot of them are listed through Foundation Scotland, and you would go through Foundation Scotland to apply. One of the experiences that I have as well is that usually the Foundation Scotland development officers are very keen to chat through with you any projects and support you with any funding applications and make you aware of what they have, what might be coming up, what's your kind of likelihood within a project. Making use of networks. So talking to people. I mean, I've got social media listed separately, but it's part of the same thing. I probably would find out about 80 to 90% of the funding that I've ever applied for, I've found out from Twitter, quite honestly. And it's just following all of the main organisations who might be able to help you, who retweet, who tell you about different funds. So that might be Development Trust Association Scotland. It can be the Hub. We frequently retweet and share information about funding news. Scottish Communities Climate Action Network. There's a host of different organisations and agencies that will share information about funding. Awareness of who the main funders are. So we're obviously talking a little bit more specifically about investing in communities here, but the lottery funding, Robertson Trust, funders like that, being aware of what their strategies are. Both the lottery and the Robertson Trust have recently changed their funding strategies. So being aware of what they're looking for in funding applications, and really being aware of those kind of main ones. Esme Fairburn would be another one that would strike me as being a large funder, and just being aware of what like even just looking at what have they previously funded, and so have I got a project that might fit it. Awareness of other projects. So I've mentioned some projects there that have happened in Highlands. On the Investing in Communities website, you'll find that there's a climate action fact sheet, and that lists quite a lot of climate action projects there. Go and have a look at those projects. Who's funded them in the past? I think when I first started looking at funding, that was one of the things that I did, was I started to look at projects that would meet the needs within Thurso, and started to look at, well, who's funded that? Is there a chance that they might fund me if they funded that other person? And then lastly, my kind of funding top tips. Always read the guidance. Investing in Communities, if that's the one that you're planning on, has got lots and lots of fantastic guidance. Read it all. Always read the small print. One of my favorite ones is, I don't know how many times people have sent me, including from national agencies, the Rural Tourism Infrastructure Fund. It's a fund that I am frequently sent over and over again by people. And nobody has ever read the small print that says it doesn't apply to settlements of more than 4,000 people, because Thurso can't apply for it. So that's one of my examples of always read the small print, always read the guidance and the criteria. Make sure that you can actually apply for it, that you're the right legal structure, that you're the right size of settlement, that you're in the right area, that you're in the right town for it. You know, yeah, always just read the guidance. Revenue costs, how much to budget. So when we're talking about revenue costs, we're talking about salary costs. Always make sure that you have calculated salary costs, including employers' pension contribution and employers' national insurance contributions. It's really important. If you need a spreadsheet to help you work out how to do that, I have a spreadsheet, and just get in contact with us at inquiries@nhclimatehub.co.uk. Because if you don't, and you submit it with a salary of say 20,000, you're going to find that then when you then go and employ that person, you actually don't have enough money to be able to pay them. So make sure that you are including their own costs as well. Another key thing to look for is, and it's not necessary for Investing in Communities, but when you're applying to other funders, do you need a match funder? Again, that goes back to reading the guidance, reading the criteria. Some people I've seen have made funding applications and they've not been aware that they needed to have a match funder. And so then they haven't been able to secure the first bit of funding that they were able to get in and were successful with. So always make sure that you've identified a match funder. If that's what they're looking for, you know, again, read the guidance. When you're writing a funding application, be clear and concise and tell a story. Do not ever think that a funder knows your community and knows what you are talking about. Always tell a story. How have you got to the point that you have got to that you require the funding for this project? So what has your community told you? How have you engaged with your community? And how have you then gone on to develop that project? So, and different funders ask different questions, but always be clear, concise, tell a story. Don't worry about using jargon. Don't worry about using fancy words. Most funders are not looking for the fancy words or the jargon. They just want you to tell a story and be passionate about telling that story as well. A bit of energy, a bit of enthusiasm, a bit of really wanting to do this project and the difference that it's going to make definitely goes a long way. When you're writing outcomes, very often you'll be asked to write outcomes for a project. Very often those outcomes will then become what your outcomes are and what your funder is expecting you to report back against. So make sure that you've written an outcome which you can actually measure. Don't try and make some kind of bold claims when you're writing an outcome. Just write it in a way that it is something that you can, that is realistic, using the SMART, criteria, but make sure that it is very realistic as a target and that you can measure it in some way. So, I mean, an example is, I'm going to make everybody in my community happy. Okay, well, how are you going to do that? And how are you going to measure that? And how are you going to say that they were sad in the first place? So always think about how you're going to actually provide some kind of measurement to be able to report back on what that outcome is that you've set. Evidence within funding applications that you're really aware of your community and you know lots of stuff about your community. So Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation, looking up the statistics and knowing the information about your community in there, knowing what, if you're engaged with your community plan and partnership, and if there are locality plans, knowing what might be in those locality plans, what is going on with your community plan and partnership, the kind of aims that they have and what's being discussed there and what reports might have come out from there. Any other statistics that you might be able to find about your community. So population statistics, numbers of people who are employed, unemployed, any form of statistics you have, and they can be your own statistics as well. And then your community evidence. So have you actually spoken to your community about this project? Have your community suggested that they do that you do something? What is it that your community wants? What is it that your community needs? That you have that kind of evidence, whether it's through engagement, that you've done huge amounts of engagement and you've maybe got full place standard reports, or maybe just that you've stood on the street and you have spoken to people as you're going past, or you've engaged with people who come to your project and to your service. But always be coming from the heart of your community. This is what your community wants. This is what your community needs, and have some form of evidence. So I think that is me now. If anybody does have any questions, I'm just going to stop sharing in a minute so I can actually see people, because it's a little bit disturbing when you can't. But also, if anybody does have anything that they want to follow up on, our email address is there, inquiries@nhclimatehub.co.uk, and that's our website as well. And we're always very happy to hear from anybody that we might be able to support. But I'm going to stop sharing now and see if there are any questions. Does anybody have any questions? I couldn't see what was going on in the chat, but it's mainly Bethany putting in all the links. That's great.
If you've got any questions, please just feel free to shout them out. There's not a lot of us on this call, and we're completely fine with that. So just shout out if you've got anything at all.
If you do have, how many people are considering an Investing in Communities application, or are they made an Investing in Communities application?
I am. Hi there. Sorry, I'm on the. I think you see my kitchen table there. Joan, I think I might have taught you once upon a time on the Sustainable Development Programme.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, we're looking at putting in an application in partnership with a CIC that I set up called Roots for Low Impact Living, and but we're kind of doing a partnership with Western Isles Libraries application to sort of extend on some kind of reuse principles that we've been using locally in Babel on the Isle of Lewis. Yeah, it's quite daunting when you start looking at the budget template. It's very like being able to predict all those costs and the measurable outcomes and stuff. It's pretty intense looking at all that. And especially when you're trying to imagine a hypothetical project, you know that you've not actually been confirmed the funding yet. So it's really, it's you haven't got the immediate buy-in from all the people that may be factored in should the funding come, because it's really hard to communicate that at the moment, and get a clear kind of view on that. Because it all depends on whether you can actually start progressing, with your ideas. So I think the point that somebody just mentioned there about salary costs and having to make sure you're putting in your national insurance contributions. I mean, I think when it comes to that, it'd be handy if we can send you an email and kind of check in with you for that.
I have a wonderful spreadsheet that you just put in what you're considering to be the salary, and it will calculate it all for you with the national insurance contributions. And I've even just done a new one because we've got new national insurance contributions as well. And you can change about what the pension contribution is that you want to have. Jill, do you have any specific advice? I know that you can only be very general, but any kind of advice? Yeah.
Yeah, and Rebecca, it's really, I totally understand the point that you're making there. And it's really tricky because what we've heard for a long time is the need for longer term funding so that, you know, you can deliver it over a longer period of time. Of course, that comes with its own problems of how can you predict what the costs are going to be going forward.
Yeah.
Use the calculator that Joan's got, and that's brilliant that she's able to share that with you. And that's fine around salary costs. I think that, you know, the challenge comes in delivering projects. You're not quite sure at the beginning what all of those costs might look like over a 3-year period. But bear in mind, I mean, we will come back to you at the end of each year, and we will check your finances for the next year. And once you're up and running, if there are changes, then we will work with you around that. So don't overly worry about that. I think the bit is trying to take as sensible a route around your projected costings as you possibly can. So you don't want to overinflate those costs to allow for something that you don't yet know, but you equally don't want to then underestimate the costs that you're going to need. But if you successfully fund, we will work with you around that. So that bit of predicting over the 3 years, try not to worry about that too much.
Okay. Oh, well, that's good. We'll do the best we can then.
What I will say, Rebecca, is I've applied for, we've had both 2-year and 3-year funding awards for various different projects. I think probably our first one was actually Climate Challenge Fund, and I think our difficulty there was making sure that we got it spent, if I'm being honest, because Alistair's laughing at me, but it's, when you're doing a Climate Challenge funded project, you know, like we had budget for timber, and then we got scaffolding boards for free. So then you were like, okay, well, what do we go and spend this on? Because it's not the nature of the project. And the nature of community organisations and third sector organisations is that we don't, you know, if we can avoid spending some money, then we will avoid spending some money. But it is then also the flip side is making sure that you have got all of those costs covered. So it is a little bit of being I'm not going to say creative accounting because it's not creative accounting, but it's trying to think around everything that you think that you could possibly need to spend and making sure that you've got it there. And I'd say also one of the things as well is that when you're going for a fund, which is mainly revenue funding. So for example, we have funding at the trust through the Robertson Trust and the Caithness and North Sutherland Fund, which is just revenue funding for staff, for our core staff. But what those core staff do is they go out and they seek project funding. So when we decide, well, we quite like to do a lunch club, then we go and seek that project funding from somewhere else. So, you know, there's other ways that you can do it if you think that, you know, if there's something that comes up within a 3-year period.
Yeah, because I think that's another thing is just, there would be a couple salaries to pay for, but also we're looking a lot at like workshop facilitation. So you're kind of paying people by the hour for that, you know, and just to come and facilitate a workshop. So I wouldn't maybe put that in as a salary cost. I don't know. That would probably still be a salary cost. You just have to explain how that salary cost would be used and maybe distribute.
You would include that as, you would include it as sessional time, so your sessional staff workers. I think the point that Joe made as well earlier was a really good one, and that speak to other people and speak to other groups that have delivered similar projects, because they'll be able to help you as well in you know, learning from their own experiences around delivering, what kind of costs and anything that they maybe hadn't costed for that came up, or things that they'd overcosted for that they then didn't need, because sometimes having more money than you actually need is a bigger problem as not having enough.
Okay.
I would definitely say having too much money is a bigger problem. Lincoln, have you got a question?
Yeah, thanks. I'm Lincoln Carroll from, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep. From Moving On Employment Project in Shetlands, we support young people essentially into employment, but most of the travelling is done in between times. So the job's the kind of outcome, but there's a lot of work done with young people in between. So it's really interesting to see what sort of looking at things like just transition. We have a lot of young people that that inequality and poverty are huge issues for them, and part of the main reasons that they are able to move on is because of these issues they have. And like, I suppose a lot of you folks, travel is a huge issue, and transport issues are fairly significant as well. So accessing opportunities. But one of the things I wondered was, we work with quite a few, just looking at the different projects and things that, in terms of the climate, there's quite a few we work with quite closely that are involved in that. If we were looking for funding through this, if we were working with an organisation and trying to deliver opportunities with that organisation, especially just thinking about our local bike project, can you fund like together, like a sort of a joint project, I suppose? Is that something that can be done? Because I wasn't sure how that would work in terms of, if there was a salary for somebody there and salary for somebody here, how would that work? And is that a really complicated process?
No, that's totally fine. And we're encouraging that partnership approach as well. So I think the only thing, and Jones, your presentation was excellent. I should have had you along to do all of our ACF presentations, Joan. That was brilliant. I think the one bit that I would just like to emphasize in that is very much around that partnership approach. And because there is a lot in this fund, that's, there are 4 areas that we're looking for these proposals to tackle, and we don't expect necessarily one organization to be able to do all of that. So we're tackling poverty and inequality, place-based approaches, community-led, and net zero. So a partnership approach is a really good way actually of addressing that. So you've got different elements, and this is the importance of asking the community what they want and need, and there'll be different elements that the community wants and needs. So how collectively in that place-based approach can you come together to address those needs? And there may be organisations, you're focusing on employability, Lincoln, which is brilliant. There may be other organisations in your local area that are helping to support some of those other aspects of poverty and exclusion, helping young people, whether it's they're setting up their first homes or they're dealing with that energy crisis or that wider issue within their families. So how you connect with other partners around addressing those complex challenges is really important. We try to make the process to do that as easy as we possibly can. So it needs one lead applicant. So you would agree with the other group that you're working with, who's going to be the kind of lead applicant there. And the way that it's set out is that you identify the other partners that you're working with and what aspects of it they're going to be delivering on. So you might be partnering up with another organisation that's delivering something that's a little bit more climate focused. And the same people that are using your employability service are also kind of going and meeting other young people through a climate project of some kind, whether it's a growing project, they're learning other skills there and how to work with peers or different, intergenerational age groups and also those kind of sorts of things that can help set them up for the future and just develop those kind of rounded skills that people need. So it's really all kind of try to be geared towards that, so you can identify the other groups that you're working with. If you've got salary costs, absolutely, it can be somebody sitting in your organisation and someone else sitting in the partner organisation, and you simply just need to tell us which staff costs are related to which post and which organisation that they're in. It's all on the one form. I know it's an Excel spreadsheet and it's a little bit, it's Excel, but hopefully it's clear enough to be able to do that, and you just identify those individual costs.
Okay, no, that's really helpful, because when we're talking about the bike project, really the support that some of these young people need longer term that they currently can't offer, we can do some of that, but neither of us have the resources of staff to be able to do that on an ongoing basis. So what we'd spoken about was the opportunities for work experience, to see how these young people get on, and then possibly they may be able to get a job there on a short-term basis, which is supported employment, and then we can support them to go on from there. And that, and it's just taken off through the pandemic because people were wanting to get bikes, affordable bikes that they can use and things like that. So and it's encouraging those young people as well to get a bike, because they can get a fairly good discount then working there, or fix it up themselves. But other things like our community garden, and there's a couple other organisations I can think of that we kind of work with, but we haven't. It's all pretty ad hoc because we've all been struggling to offer opportunities for volunteering through the pandemic, because you get started and then there's a lockdown. So it's been a real challenge, but we're looking more at that now as well. And some of the young people who are with us are going to be with us long term, which is more challenging for them and for us to try and continue to challenge them to improve their skills. But all of that is around sort of community growing or recyclable things and recycling and upcycling and stuff like that. So it's, I suppose, it's kind of climate stuff, but having listened to you guys, it really is. It's important. And some of the things of reusing and repurposing and supporting people, especially when they get their first tenancy, all that kind of stuff, getting things for them that other people just, are thrown away or given away. We would like to be able to have somewhere where we could store things that some of our young people could have when they get a tenancy, but space is a premium, and that's something we don't have. But certainly you get people in the community saying, we've got a lounge suite that we don't need anymore. Do you have somewhere or somebody that wants it? And that's a real challenge. So that's something to think about as well. Jane's got a hand up. So I'll shut up now.
Jane, do you want to come in? I know Alistair's got his hand up as well, but
it was just actually a point on. I was just about on Lincoln's point actually. If I could just quickly kind of come in on that one, because Lincoln, did you say you're up in Shetland? Is that right? I missed the start of the. Yeah. Just wondered if it might be worth getting in touch with the Citizens Advice Bureau, because they've had some funding recently to do some kind of climate action work, particularly around energy. And I think they've got some funding that's still got another year or two maybe left on it. Might just be worth a quick kind of dropping them a line or something to see if there's any kind of overlaps, just in case, like if through the project or whatever you came across people that didn't necessarily need the support that you were offering, but had other needs and stuff. It's good to kind of have like a good map of people you can signpost to. But so that's just one that kind of came to mind when I was thinking about what you were saying.
We share a building with them, so that's an easy.
Good. Okay.
I think one of the key things for hearing you speak there as well, Lincoln, was that I don't think we were doing climate action, but we are doing climate action. And that's one of the things that I'm very keen for groups to understand, is that you might not think that you are, but you actually are. So, yeah. Jane.
Thank you. I'm also in Shetland, and it's Shetland Shared Lives. And I was going to say about the working in partnership. I've built into the application form in response to the questions about the partnerships we have, but those partnerships are already funded to do the, for example, Ability Shetland with their accessible bikes, etc. So, and it's a very quick turnaround for the application. So I was wondering if in year 2 or year 3, we could more realistically write in looking at the possibilities for joint funding, because I think it's very hard to do it in this very short period of time. So I just wondered that if that was a possibility, because we're working, with moving on, for example, with Lincoln's group, we work very closely with them anyway, and they have their own funding systems. So that was my question. Thank you.
Yeah, so we've been trying to do a lot of pre-launch work. So actually going back to November of last year to try and give as much lead-in time as we could to the fund opening. So I appreciate the funding window itself is open for a short time, but information about the fund has been available for sort of 6 months to help with that, because partnerships are not easy to set up. They're not quick to set up. I kind of understand that, albeit we've seen some form really quickly over the course of the pandemic. That have been brilliant. So a lot of this has been around trying to maintain and support some of those partnerships that have formed. I think, Jane, perhaps what you're suggesting is a little bit trickier in terms of how you might do that in the application form in terms of costs, because that's a little bit more, I'm afraid, kind of feels a bit more finger in the wind as to how much you might need, and the guesswork to kind of form those partnerships a bit more formally. I think you can certainly point towards establishing more formal partnership working arrangements with some of the groups that are round about you. most definitely. And I think we've not been prescriptive around the type of partnership that you have, or its status or its formality. And we know that they exist in communities in many different forms, from just keeping connected with what each other are doing to actually working together in a much more formal funding way. Certainly, like I say, you could point towards making those relationships a little bit more formal, and it depends on the project that you're potentially looking to deliver with them. And yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the lead-in time was good. It was just this conversation coming up just now made me reflect on that. But I think our sort of experience of working together across the whole, as Lincoln said there, we're in the same building, for example. I think it's just articulating how that's working rather than the funding coming together, because it's across that area. So thank you. That's been really useful to work that through. One practical question: downloading the application form once you've started to populate it. I haven't been able to do that. Is that possible?
So I don't think it's got the technical bit has not been enabled to enable you to download the form as such. I think the idea is that you do it online and it's there for you. The questions are kind of there and they're available. You can save and come back to it. I think you've got the ability to kind of copy it into a Word version, I think, locally, if you wanted to. But not to download it. I can raise that with the technical team, Jane, if there's a specific reason you want to be able to download it. No, it's not something that we're particularly.
No, it's just very very handy when you're working offline, just to have the there. But I can print it. I've printed it. It's absolutely fine. I printed it, so that's fine.
I can definitely confirm that the save and continue option works very, very well.
That's good to hear.
Look, it worked very well indeed.
Right, okay, good. We had a past experience with one of the COVID funds and it just didn't let you save and continue. If you didn't do it in one go, I was, oh no, that's not happening.
Something that I tend to do as well is always just open a Word document, copy all the questions, paste it onto the Word document, and then I just basically don't do it online. I'll just do it all from the Word document. And then when I feel like I'm happy with it, I copy paste it into the online form. So that seems to help a lot as well.
Simon, you got a question?
Yeah, thanks. So I went on the form and it asked questions about constitution and things, and it asked for evidence of, I can't actually remember the details, but there was some, I think you were requiring evidence that the person filling in the application form was an officer of the company or something. And I thought, oh, all right, I need to go and find that evidence, which I didn't succeed in doing. But when I went back to the form, those questions had gone and I can't find them. So it's kind of like I haven't supplied that evidence. I'm not quite sure what evidence it is you actually need. And in any case, that question's vanished. Can you help with that?
Yeah, so there's two parts to the portal. There's the initial registration part, which is all about you and your organization and your constitution. Then there's the application form part of it. So it asks for those documents as supporting evidence, but it will let you progress. So what I can say at the moment is, like, don't worry about that right now, and we will come back to you if there's more information that we need at a later stage. So some groups, we've had a number of inquiries around that they've looked to go back to upload the documents and now can't do it. So there's a message going out to say, if you've not been able to upload them, then don't worry about it. We'll come back and ask you for that at a later stage. In terms of I think it's the authorized person that, and it's part of really, I suppose, ensuring that kind of security and due diligence when doing an online form, that we need to have some assurance in the process that the person that's actually putting an application form in on behalf of an organization is actually authorized to do that, and that people within the management board of the organisation know that that's happened. So it's that bit of, like I say, just due diligence, cross-checking. If it can be something as simple as a copy of an email from somebody in the board that says you're authorised to put this application in. So anything that you might have, if you're written into your constitution as being an authorised person to make applications, that's great, and it'll be in the constitution and you'll have already uploaded that. If that's not something that's written specifically into your constitution, then, like I say, a simple letter or copy of an email from somebody within the organisation would square that off.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help?
Yes.
Good. Okay.
Is there any other questions? Well, I don't know about Orkney and Shetland, but the sun has just started shining here. So it's past 5 o'clock now. So I'll let everybody go. But if there is anything that anybody wants to come to us with, any other questions that you think about afterwards, if you'd like us to have a look at anything for you, then by all means do so, for either this fund or for any other funding that you might be looking for. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Joan, for setting that up.
Bye.
Thanks.
No problem.